Hello everyone, welcome back this week for another ride. And instead of going back out to the desert, I thought about it the other day, and I'm always looking out of the city, and I'm always riding out to the desert, but I never look to the city itself. I guess because I'm there, every day during the week, and then I work right downtown. So when it's so familiar to and so routine, you don't stop, take a step back and think that, other people may want to actually see what the downtown area looks like. Maybe they've never been there, or maybe they plan on a visit. So I decided to take a look around. It's 500 square miles, so I wasn't able to do its true justice, which would be probably two and a half days of riding. But I hit some familiar areas downtown and a little bit uptown. Let's start with a few brief statistics, and then I'll do a brief historical overview. I'm not going to get into the entire history of the city, but I think it's important to touch on its roots and the infancy of the city back in the 1800s. So Phoenix population has risen dramatically over the past decade to 1.6 million. The Greater Phoenix Metro combined is 4.6 million. So that's debatable. I mean, Maricopa County is 4.7 million. If we exclude the outlying areas like Wickenburg and Gila Bend, I don't know, it might be 4.2, but it's a large metropolitan area. In fact, it's the fifth largest metropolitan area in North America. I did mention that it comprises 500 square miles. It was incorporated in 1881, and I'll get into that, and we'll do a brief historical overview as well. What's also important is the consumer price index rose 12.3% over the past year. So that's significant. I mean, we're all, North America has an economic crisis right now. That's no secret. But if you compare Phoenix to other cities back east, they're between 7 and 9%. So Phoenix is higher, and it's probably due to the housing, and we'll get into that as well. So we've had an upended housing market here the last year and a half. So let's get into a little bit of Phoenix history. And I think we should start with the name. So most people know what the reference to Phoenix is, that it was a fabulous bird reborn from the ashes of its previous life. So out of the ashes is what's most known as a common reference to the word Phoenix. And that's actually true. And in this context, it's very appropriate. That may very well be the intended reference from one of the city's founders. His name was Darrell Dupa. This native of Paris was actually Cambridge educated and an early pioneer in the post-Civil War period of the late 1860s. It seems that he thought that the reemergence of a new civilization could rise from the Pueblo Grande ruins, so that's the Hohokam, which were occupied between 700 and 1400 AD. The Salt River ran right through this Hohokam community that used an extensive irrigation system consisting of 135 miles of canals, making the land very fertile. It is widely believed that this civilization was unable to survive beyond the year 1400 due to a widespread drought in the region. Interesting. Then if we fast forward nearly 500 years to 1867, when Jack Swilling, a former Confederate soldier, stopped to rest his horse at the foot of the northern slopes of the White Tank Mountains, noticed the quality of the soil. He noticed that the soil being of good quality, it presented enormous potential for farmland, the entire Salt Valley. So he returned with several men, and they began digging a canal to divert water from the Salt River back into the valley to kind of follow this model that the Hohokam had established 500 years earlier. After irrigation was restored to the valley, they began planting. Then by 1868, they were raising crops, and interest grew in his endeavor and in the area. The area known as modern Tempe was then known as Swilling's Mill. So that's where the Phoenix was actually established, was back in Tempe, or East Phoenix at the time. Years later, this changed to Mill City, and then eventually to East Phoenix. Today, Mill Avenue in the Mill Avenue district in Tempe is an extremely popular destination for visitors to ASU and locals as well. In this post-Civil War period, there was a lot of expansion occurring, and Prescott, up north in Yavapai County, had already been established as the Territory Command Post. In 1868, the Yavapai County Board of Supervisors extended their boundaries to cover East Phoenix, and Phoenix was officially recognized. By 1870, pioneers began moving to Phoenix, and it was clear that an actual township needed to be established. The 320 acres of downtown real estate was purchased in 1870 for $50. By 1875, there were 16 saloons, 4 dance halls, and 2 banks. It's good they had their priorities in order. 16 saloons, really? By 1880, Phoenix had 2,453 residents and had outgrown its commissioner form of government. So in 1881, a bill made Phoenix an incorporated city, and a mayor, marshal, town treasurer, and town council had been elected and installed. On March 12, 1895, they went on the map. So the Santa Fe, Prescott, and Phoenix railroads ran their first trains to Phoenix, so now it was actually on the national map. By the turn of the century, it was decided that Phoenix would be the capital of the territory of Arizona, and $130,000 was allocated for the construction of the Capitol building. That's significant. It was dedicated in 1901, and Phoenix was well on its way to becoming a metropolis. So I'm not going to get into any more history, 20th century and forward. I just thought it was important to have a brief historical overview from ancient times through the 1800s. And then it's also important to highlight how the city got its name. And so you all know about the Pueblo Grande Museum, which is downtown. If you haven't heard of it, it's actually a pretty good museum, and it's got some really good recreations of an ancient Hohokam village, and there's a lot of history in this area, a lot of culture. You just have to seek it out. So it is a beautiful city. There's a lot going on, and I'm happy to live here, but I don't just gloss over everything. This is not a promotional video, and you can't have an honest discussion about Phoenix without recognizing that Phoenix has some major issues with overpopulation, water supply, air quality, lack of affordable housing, education, and recently and unfortunately homelessness. The increasing prevalence of the urban heat island is also concerning, and that puts Phoenix on the front lines of global warming. So urban blight is also creeping in as homelessness seems to be surging over the past year, especially. I think with the upended housing crisis has contributed to that. So it's really unfortunate, and I know the city and county folks, and as well as the state, are doing everything they can. But of course, in this environment today, with politicization and bureaucracy, it's just difficult to see real progress happen as quickly as it's needed. But I know that we have good leadership. I know we got some good people working to address all these issues in our city. And I think at the end of the video, we'll talk a little bit more about what is being done specifically. So case in point, I looked at, these are apartments in here in this Midtown section are really nice. They're well maintained. You can see there's a couple of parks. There's a lot to do. People out running in the morning, cafes, shops. You can see right there, there's a cafe right downstairs in one of the apartment buildings. $1,667 a month for a studio. And yeah, I checked it. That's 500, just over 500 square foot studio. Not even one bedroom is $1,667, and the prices range up to in excess of $2,500 a month. And I just don't know. I mean, these are mortgage payments. I mean, I'm not sure what's happening in the Midtown there, but it seems that we have had a population of trendy tech people move in, and that's great that they moved in. The tech sector is starting to populate Phoenix, and that's great. But are we seeing the start of gentrification? I'm not really sure, because I don't think some of the other people that have lived here in Phoenix traditionally would be able to afford $2,500 a month for a one-bedroom apartment if you've got a wife and a kid. So the apartments in Midtown aren't representative of what most people that live in Phoenix live in. They're going to be in the outlying communities and apartment complexes, and that's why they're having to commute 30, 45 minutes. Even up to an hour depending on traffic to get into the city. So as we see ASU downtown campus right here on the corner, that's just one building of probably 24, as you can see from the map. But there's 12,000 enrolled at the ASU downtown campus. there's 100,000 total. So there's 50,000 in Tempe at the main campus. There's 12,000, as I mentioned, downtown here. Another 5,000 enrolled at Polytechnic, 4,000 at West, and then what's called digital immersion or online. It's at the balance of 29 or 30,000. The downtown campus is mostly graduate schools. They've got the journalism school down here, the Sandra Day O'Connor Law School, the nursing. I think that's a graduate program as well for advanced nursing. Public service and community solutions, and they've got the teaching. They've got a graduate teachers program, and then they've got the Global School of Management, the Thunderbird, and that's a graduate program as well. So mostly graduate programs downtown. Sorry for ending the recording on a somber note, but this issue is important to me. It seems to have gained traction since the pandemic and exacerbated by the economy. And then add to that the upended housing market here in Phoenix. It's like a perfect storm. So the city does have an office called Human Services and a task force that's convened, as you can see here. Pretty good website. So they convened in April to discuss and evaluate the city's current plan. And I read through the report. The strategy seems to be focused on shelter beds, and which is good, but it still doesn't address the root causes of the surge, which is likely that of an acute crisis due to the turbulent past few years, dimensions that I previously mentioned. The chronic homeless and the severely mentally ill are one thing, but I think there's a lot of people out there, and there's some recent stats coming in from California that show that a lot of people, families even, I think need to be identified that are suffering from, this perfect storm of the economic crisis, the pandemic, and then the housing, the upended housing market in both of these states. Those folks need to be identified before they fall into an unrecoverable situation. And I just don't know if that's acknowledged or anything's being done with that. You just have to deep dive, and I don't see any of that here. Good plan. I mean, they're obviously very committed to everything, and I'm sure that a lot of the stakeholders, like the Central Arizona Shelter Services and some of the organizations, the NGOs and stuff that support this, I'm sure they're very aware of that. I'd just like to see more. I don't know why it's not being addressed. But they need to be identified. Those folks need to be identified before they fall into that 1-year definition of chronically homeless. So if we go to sustainability, that was the other thing I wanted to discuss briefly that I had mentioned earlier in the video. The city has an office of sustainability as well, which is great. They're fairly well evolved in this area. They have the 7, as you can see right here on the left side, 7 goals for 2050. It says 8, but I only count 7. Local food systems, clean air, parks, preserves, building, and land use, water stewardship, waste, transportation. So that's 7, but they work in collaboration with county and state departments in these areas. I know that ADEQ, which is the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, has a pretty robust monitoring program. So let's take a look at the clean air. Pretty good. So how's our air right now? Interactive map. That's not too bad. I don't see ozone on here. I don't know if that maybe it was monitored separately. I don't see urban heat island. So I think the urban heat island is mentioned, but there should be an interactive map of that or something that shows the urban heat island areas. Last thing I promise, if you want to pull down data for your city and build a customizable overlay, visit arcgis.com. You can see in the address bar. They offer a free map through Esri that allows for pretty decent functionality. Higher level visualizations require payment, of course. I had mentioned the heat island issue in Phoenix and the importance of monitoring for the city of Phoenix. So it is offered here, so let's take a look. So you just go over here to layers. I want to add layers, and then there's hundreds of selections. And so urban heat island, I actually had entered it into the search criteria. So let's go ahead over here, back over here, we turn it on. Let's close that. And if we take a look at Phoenix and we drill down a little bit, what do we see? So we see heat island enveloping all these areas right here. And, I'm just going to call it out, the lower economic areas. North Phoenix, the high rent area that we saw, or maybe uptown a little bit as we get into uptown. We see that the heat island or the urban heat island is less prevalent. So, and there's been historically a correlation, a pretty strong correlation between tree density and heat island prevalence. So plant more trees in South Phoenix, right? So this is the kind of data, but I'm not going to get into the politics of that. This is the kind of data that city analysts, planners, and lawmakers need to be looking at and sharing with the public. So today we've covered a lot. Sorry for going off on several tangents. I thank you for watching. If you made it this far in the video, I congratulate you. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Next week I'll be back out in the desert, so have a great weekend.